Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Dido Harding, the serial cock-up merchant who messed up our test and trace system to the point where the government won't even talk about it now, is aligning herself to bring the same level of failure for the entire NHS in England. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I think all I can say to begin with is thank goodness healthcare is devolved in this country. At least the parts of the UK that didn't vote for this Tory shower will escape the worst of this. Dido Harding, technically Baroness Harding, is making her pitch to become the next boss of NHS England as part of the government's plans to run our healthcare into the ground and rebuild it as an American-style, largely unregulated private insurance scam. She's been providing more reasons to doubt her suitability this weekend, as an article in the Times made mention of the fact she wants us to reduce our reliance on foreign doctors and nurses and become a net exporter of medics around the world. She actually said that we should be exporting talent, not importing it. So let me just break that down. She is saying that we should not be attracting highly skilled people into the UK. I mean, Brexit's largely seen to that anyway. But instead, what we should be doing, right, is training up highly skilled and useful people and then encouraging them to leave the country to power someone else's economy. So we should be using our universities and some public money to train up people for skills that we need. And she says we should then send them to the world. Kind of messed up thinking is that. I suppose it's the kind that has led her to being an abject failure in every job she's ever had that didn't involve sitting on a horse. In this video, I'm going to go through the various reasons why Dido Harding should not only not be given the job of head of NHS England, even though she will be, but should never be given any supervising role in the public sector ever again. First is her record. So she first rose to prominence for me. I first heard of her as chief executive of TalkTalk, an ISP, when she compromised the personal data of tens of thousands of customers' personal details. It's just all lost, all went, all stolen. The company lost a crap ton of share value, as you'd expect, when she left. She not only denied that her departure had nothing to do with the mess she'd left, even though she had to leave in a bit of a hurry, but she even had the nerve to suggest that she'd done great things there and just wanted to, you know how some people may come into a company and actually build it up and they go, oh, I want a new challenge now. She tried to fill that mould. It wasn't working. Next, we hear that she's going to run the government's vital test and trace programme. Now, bear in mind where we were last year. At the time, the government were losing control of the pandemic situation badly. We had advance notice, we had it under control at the start. Then Boris Johnson's bullish attitude about taking it on the chin went disastrously wrong. He nearly killed himself with it. Never mind the tens of thousands who did pay with his crass error with their lives. Test and trace was going to be the thing to sort it all out. He was being hammered in Parliament and by Labour and others. And he does test and trace. We're going to have this test and trace thing. It's going to be marvellous. World beating. People were crying out to let the NHS manage it. But no. Harding rammed together a random collection of private companies and bolted bits of the NHS alongside it to make a system that was failing from the very start. Workers on the system weren't given training. Their logins weren't working. Many of them were just sat around home. They couldn't actually do their jobs. People weren't being traced in anything like the numbers needed. Now, the government have stopped talking about test and trace. Last year, they just wanted to talk about it. It was the answer to every question was test and trace. Now, they won't even talk about it. It's all about the vaccines now, you know. But the thing is, you know, that's been organised by the NHS, hasn't it? Not this dipshit. Oh, and that's going well. Why is that then? The procurement of vaccines, fair enough, was also handled by someone from the private sector, but that didn't work out too badly because it was by someone who was actually successful in the private sector, not this serial cock-up merchant. So far, Harding has been allocated £37 billion of funds for this system. Now, just to be clear, that's not how much she's spent. but the budget she's been given. I don't actually know how much it's cost so far. I think the latest figure I heard might have been around about 20 billion of it, but I don't know. What I do know is that a House of Commons committee earlier this year found that it was an absurd cost for what we got in return and that it failed badly to deliver. So on both points. Now, it has been pointed out in comparison with the German system. They produced a system for much less that actually worked. Okay, right, it might not be as less as some people are claiming, but the point is that Germany's test and trace system worked and it cost less. I mean, that's that. You can't say fairer than that. Harding tried to defend her role by saying that people expected too much of it. People's expectations were too high. To which I would have two things to say, and I do not know why journalists didn't put this to her. One, Boris Johnson promised us a world-beating test and trace system. The expectations were not random expectations. They were set by the Prime Minister, her boss, right? He said world-beating. That means it has to be at least as good as any other system in the world. If she did not deliver a system that was as good as anyone in the world had, she has failed by definition, simple as that. But the second thing is, I would say very few of us really took Johnson's boast seriously. All we wanted was a system that worked. It didn't on any level, world beaten or even just mediocre. I'm going to say of mediocrity. Couldn't decide between mediocre and mediocrity. Doesn't matter, doesn't work. Doesn't work, doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's all right talking about the vaccines, but we still have caseloads increasing. That's where test and trace needed to keep it down, and it's not doing. The reason why the number of cases is going up and up and up isn't because our rate of vaccines is not great. It's fine. All right, it's not as good as a lot of EU countries now. Not a lot been said about that in the news. But it's still fine. It's still pretty good. The reason the cases are going up is because our test and trace is not managing. And the House of Commons, every report ever written about it is talking about it as an abject failure. Even, like I say, I mean, the reason why I particularly point to a House of Commons committee is because that's mostly Conservative MPs sitting on it. And they say it's a shambles. The second reason why Harding's unsuitable is her connections. See, the head of NHS England needs to be someone who's accountable. The head of any public department really needs to be accountable. Harding is not accountable because she has too many powerful connections. She is the chair of the Court of the Bank of England's Remuneration Committee. Basically means she gets to decide on the pay of very senior officials. So controlling pay means you control an awful lot of influence over the people whose pay you control. Stands to reason. Oh, and if you think she may be guilty of corruption at any point in the future, and I'm not suggesting she has been as yet, but let's say an accusation of corruption was levelled at her. Well, that's okay, you can report her. You contact the government's anti-corruption board, who just so happens to be her husband. So if we were to be generous and suppose that the government actually wanted to strengthen the NHS in England, in Harding, they'd be appointing someone who could cause an awful lot of problems for anyone who wanted to express dissatisfaction with her work. She'd be pretty much untouchable, a law unto herself. Not what we want from any public servant, because she'd only be serving herself, not the public. The third reason for her unsuitability is because of her pitching for the job, publicly pitching. So she's been doing this for some time now, even getting articles published in the national press. This is not normal. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it before. I can also say that there has been nobody else in the running doing this either. Now, think about some of those comments about reducing our reliance on foreign medics. Now, what's that about? I don't even know how you'd go about significantly increasing the number of British doctors and nurses. I mean, with nurses, yes, we could pay them properly. We could have a drive and we could pay them properly, but the government aren't keen on doing that. Doctors are paid well enough, I would have thought. I don't know how the conditions in the UK for a doctor compare to other countries, but there's certainly no plan for massively increasing our homegrown talent. And a plan, remember, is not simply stating an aim. It's not Boris Johnson saying we should have more doctors and nurses. Oh, right, we've got a plan. That's not a plan. A plan, how are you going to do it? So why make a statement like this when she has zero chance of bringing it about? Brexit mindset. All there is to it. It's the done thing now to claim that we're not just geographically but metaphorically an island. That we don't need foreigners. We don't need to be connected to the world. We can do everything on our own. We're going to be getting someone running our NHS who has no success story on her CV, who is part of a powerful network of influence, who is bringing the self-destructive Brexit mindset to her work. And she'll get the job. Not because she's well connected, not even because Johnosn and Hancock are just deluded and somehow think she's due a good run after her recent history. You know, as if it's like rolling dice. Eventually you'll get a good one. It'll be quite deliberate because her role won't actually be to deliver improvements to the NHS. It will be to run it into the ground. It has long been the Tory plan to claim record funding for the NHS, but to highlight how it is failing every measure. Never mind that the last Labour government actually met ambitious targets when they were in government. The Conservatives watered down those targets and then still failed to meet them. They claim to be pumping more and more money into it. But if that's the case, how come you're getting worse and worse results than Labour did? In reality, what's happening is all that funding is being diverted to private companies. The long-term plan is to have the NHS fail, claim that the public funding model is unsustainable. And again, you know, they'll get people to believe it because they'll go, well, look at all this money we've pumped into it. And they'll show you year on year an increase in the level of NHS funding. What they won't tell you is how much of that has gone to private companies. So people will say, oh, well, actually, fair play. They're putting lots of money into it and it's still failing. Oh, yeah, we're convinced the public funding model doesn't work. And they'll use it to justify private healthcare. So America, best healthcare system in the world. May well be if you can afford it. And they will start by shifting some services to private healthcare only. They'll remove services from the NHS, but say, oh, you just need to go private for them, bit by bit. They'll make people pay not only their national insurance and taxes that a decent government would use to fund a properly resourced healthcare system, but they'll make us pay for our care on top of it. Like we already do for dentistry. That's the model for all medical care. You know, almost impossible to get an NHS dentist. Now you sort of already accept the fact you have to go private for that. And bit by bit, with every general election win they get, they will send us further down that path until the NHS exists in name only. They'll keep the name because the NHS is terribly important to people. They'll keep the name, but it won't actually exist. And Dido Harding is part of that plan. You know, not the one that will be stated on her job description. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.